The Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 5 is the golden standard in today's foldable market. I'm not saying that it's the best foldable phone on the market, but it's definitely the benchmark for others to beat. This is mostly due to popularity and user experience, but with the competition ramping up more, I'm not sure how much longer this is going to be the case. Today, we're comparing the Galaxy Z Fold 5 against one of those competitors. This is the Honor Magic V2 RSR Porsche design, and it's honestly a work of art. Before we get into why, let me preface a few things. Honor is a global smartphone manufacturer, but due to carrier restrictions here in the US, support is very limited. Also, the pricing is vastly different between these two phones. The Z Fold 5 comes in storage configurations ranging from 256 gigabytes up to 1 terabyte, with prices ranging from $1,599 to $2,150. Now, Samsung is always running specials, with typically the best trade-in deals on the market. On the flip side, the Magic V2 RSR Porsche design comes only in one variant with 1 terabyte of storage, and its price varies. The price is anywhere between $2,600 and a whopping $3,200. That said, you could technically get the non-Porsche design of the Magic V2 for less, plus you do get a lot more with the Porsche design than you do with the Galaxy Z Fold 5, and the best way to show you this is with the unboxing experience. The design of the Z Fold 5 is definitely getting stale. It's not that it's terrible, since there are a few things that Samsung absolutely nails, but after 5 generations, we are still using the same narrow candy bar design. Thankfully, Samsung did decide to remove the gap on the Z Fold 5, which decreased its thickness slightly. Even so, it's nothing compared to the Honor Magic V2 RSR Porsche design. When side by side, the Galaxy Z Fold 5 just appears ancient. The Magic V2 RSR is 9.9 millimeters thick when closed, making it one of, if not the thinnest foldable phone on the market. The Galaxy Z Fold 5 is 13.4 millimeters. I mean, take a look at the differences in camera bumps. Let me put this into a different perspective. If Honor made this phone any thinner, I don't think the USB-C port would fit. The thinness isn't the only thing that makes it a better design. It's also how usable the cover display is. The Honor Foldable just feels like a traditional smartphone when closed. The screen real estate is great, which means you get a nice sized keyboard experience when using it. The Galaxy Z Fold 5 just feels way too cramped. But I do understand why some people like the narrow design, since it's easier to navigate the phone, plus it forces you to open it up and use that interior display a little bit more. But I also believe that most people haven't used a foldable phone quite like the Honor. It's really hard to go back to the Z Fold 5 based on design alone. Also, when unfolded, the Honor has a far less intrusive crease than the Z Fold 5. Is it completely non-existent? No. You could definitely see it when viewing the display off axis, but it's still better than the Z Fold 5. That said, I do feel Samsung still has the best hinge mechanism in the game. I love how you can easily position it in nearly any angle, and it just feels a little bit more solid. Honor's hinge doesn't feel bad by any means, but after you reach a certain point, it will automatically snap itself into position. This is very similar to the hinge that's found on the Oppo Find N3 and the OnePlus Open. Oh, and the Z Fold 5 also takes the W for durability, since its IP rating exceeds the Magic V2 RSR. The displays on both of these phones are great, but once again, the Honor Magic V2 RSR is better in nearly every way. Starting with the cover display, the Z Fold 5 features a 6.2-inch 120Hz OLED display and a 7.6-inch 120Hz dynamic OLED inner display, both of which are rated for 1,750 nits of brightness. The Magic V2 RSR features a 120Hz 6.4-inch LTPO OLED cover display with a peak brightness of 2,500 nits and a 120Hz 7.9-inch LTPO OLED inner display with a peak brightness of 1,600 nits. Both of the inner and outer displays also have 3,840 Hz of PWM dimming. Side by side, there's no denying that both inner displays are fantastic. On paper, the Samsung has the brighter display, but leaving both phones in their respectable auto modes with brightness turned all the way up, after several minutes, the Samsung will decrease its brightness, leaving the Honor the brighter display overall due to sustained brightness. It's also the much more natural looking display, which some may or may not like, since I know many people like that vibrant look that Samsung displays are known for, and the Z Fold 5 is no exception. When looking at the cover displays side by side, there's no question as to why the Honor has the better looking panel. Not only is it higher resolution, but it's significantly brighter and has LTPO capabilities. It's also much more usable, not only due to its larger size, but also since Honor's Magic Pen will work on the cover display, whereas Samsung's Galaxy Z Fold 5's S Pen does not work on the cover screen at all. Speaking of the pens, there's a big difference between using them as well. The Z Fold 5 has your typical S Pen functions such as writing and markup functionality, but since this doesn't have Bluetooth connectivity, the functionality is pretty limited and ends right there. The Magic V2 RSR comes with a stylus that not only provides writing and markup functionality, but it also has Bluetooth connectivity, making it also able to be used as a remote, in theory. There should be a plethora of added functionality that comes along with this additional connectivity. The problem is Honor is severely limiting what you can do with it. For instance, the Bluetooth version of the S Pen allows for camera control, custom gestures to quickly switch or launch apps, browser navigation, PowerPoint control, and much more. Even on the non-Bluetooth S Pen, you can fully customize the Air Command window and add your own apps. The Magic Pen has plenty of slots available to add apps in the pen menu, but only 3 to 4 options can be added. Another example of Honor not following through with the software experience is the gesture support. There's clearly an on-off toggle within the stylus settings, but no mention as to how to perform them, and when searching online, there's no mention of them at all. The only use case Honor has baked into the phone software outside of drawing and writing is a spotlight feature. This basically turns the pen into a laser pointer, which is great for presentations, but all you can do with it is turn pages or go back to the previous page. You're not able to select things or access menus. It's really upsetting to see the potential of the Magic Pen being severely crippled by Honor software. This brings us to performance. Let's start with the overall software experience, since that's what we were just talking about. This is one area that Samsung has absolutely mastered. The Z Fold 5 easily has one of, if not the best multitasking foldable experiences on the market. You can smoothly run 2 apps side by side or have 3 apps running at once. You can also toss in a couple pop-up apps on top of that, but these are pretty basic features. Where the Z Fold 5 takes it up a notch is with the taskbar for easy app navigation and by dragging and dropping files from one app to another for easy sharing of images, videos, or documents. It also has better flex mode support than the Magic V2 RSR, allowing for more apps to take advantage of the Hinge. Now that being said, the Honor Magic V2 RSR isn't a slouch in the software department by any means, and you can still do most of the things you can do on the Z Fold 5 minus the inclusion of the taskbar and drag and drop feature. Also, the Honor doesn't feature an alternative to Samsung's DeX software, which I know a lot of people love. For performance, both of these phones are running the older Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 processor, but the Z Fold 5 is technically overclocked. Day-to-day performance is negligible for the most part. However, when it comes to extensive tasks such as gaming for long periods of time, there clearly is a difference. So even though I hate synthetic benchmarks, they are standardized, and this is really the best way to show the differences between these two phones. So let's begin with a test that most of you already know about, Geekbench 6. The Honor scored 1,510 single-core and 4,065 multi-core, whereas the Z Fold 5 had 1,958 for its single-core and 5,212 for its multi-core. Next up, I ran the Geekbench ML TensorFlow Lite test. Honor scored 473 for NNAPI, 792 for CPU, and 781 for GPU. The Z Fold 5 scored 612 for its NNAPI, 936 for its CPU, and 1,059 for its GPU. Moving on to 3D Mark. Honor scored 3,700 for the Wildlife Extreme test, 5,302 for Solar Bay. The Z Fold 5 scored 3,130 for its Wildlife Extreme test and 5,349 for its Solar Bay test. Next up, we had the CPDT disk test that will test out the SSD speeds of each of these phones. Honor scored 721 megabytes per second write and 781 megabytes per second read. The Z Fold 5 scored 917 megabytes per second write and 1.7 7 gigabytes read. Lastly, I ran the burnout test to find out which phone would overheat and thermal throttle the most. Honor just crashed and overheated to the point where it could not finish the test. I ran it multiple times in different temperatures and it just wouldn't do it. The Z Fold 5 had a compute score of 75 and a performance under throttling percentage of 54.3%. Okay, so with the synthetic benchmarks aside, let's dive into some gaming performance metrics, beginning with Asphalt 9, since it's one of the games that I know for sure the Magic V2 RSR is optimized for. The Honor had an average frames per second of 62.884, whereas the Z Fold 5 scored 57.933. In terms of Call of Duty, Honor had an average frame rate of 101.039, whereas the Z Fold 5 had 102.795. Alien Isolation, Honor scored 32.583 for its average frames per second, and the Z Fold 5 had 32.229. Diablo Immortal, Honor had an average frame rate of 56.828, whereas the Z Fold 5 had 58.358. And lastly, PUBG, Honor had an average frame rate of 39.678, whereas the Z Fold 5 had 55.413. Now let's talk about battery life and charging speeds. The Galaxy Z Fold 5 features a 4400 mAh battery, while the Magic V2 RSR packs a 5000 mAh battery, which is honestly quite impressive given its size. On average, the Honor can achieve around 10 hours and 30 minutes of screen on time when unfolded, and 13 hours when folded of mixed use. The Z Fold 5 can achieve around 12 hours of use unfolded and around 12 hours and 45 minutes folded. When it comes to charging speeds, the Magic V2 RSR can reach speeds up to 66 watts, while the Z Fold 5 tops out at 25 watts. Charging both phones from 0 to 100%, the Honor was able to do it in 1 hour, 1 minute, and 30 seconds, whereas the Z Fold 5 took 1 hour, 25 minutes, and 9 seconds. To wrap up performance, I tested out the Wi-Fi speeds of each phone since the Honor Magic V2 RSR supports Wi-Fi 7, whereas the Z Fold 5 only supports Wi-Fi 6E. My home mesh system is a Wi-Fi 7 Eero Max setup. The results are actually pretty interesting. The Magic V2 RSR's average speeds were 874 megabits per second down and 950 megabits per second up. The Z Fold 5s were 885 megabits per second down and 738 megabits per second up. One thing to note here is that Wi-Fi 7 on the Honor Magic V2 is very buggy. It would randomly disconnect altogether and I couldn't get it to reconnect unless I forgot the network and did a reset of the device. Very weird. Okay, last but not least, let's talk cameras. The Galaxy Z Fold 5 is packing a 50 megapixel main camera, 12 megapixel ultra wide, and a 10 megapixel 3x telephoto. On the front, there's a 10 megapixel selfie camera, and on the interior display, we have a 4 megapixel under display camera. In comparison, the Magic V2 RSR is packing a 50 megapixel main camera, a 50 megapixel ultra wide, and a 20 megapixel 2.5x telephoto. On the front, we have a 16 megapixel selfie camera, and the interior display also uses a 16 megapixel camera. When it comes to camera quality, both phones have their strengths. During the day, I tend to prefer the colors and contrast from the Honor more. Images just appear richer with more color tone versus the Z Fold 5. One issue I've noticed with the Magic V2 RSR is the dynamic range. While the Z Fold 5 can be overly aggressive with HDR, I still love how it can capture the details in the sky, especially with portrait mode shots like this one. Speaking of portrait mode, both are far from the best performers out there, but typically I prefer the look of the Magic V2 RSR over the Z Fold 5. This comes down to the over-sharpening that the Z Fold 5 tends to apply from time to time. While the Magic V2 RSR comes out really soft at times, it's easier to sharpen an image than it is to soften one. I also prefer skin tones on the Magic V2 RSR over the Z Fold 5, but only during the day. I'll come back to this in a second and explain things. The ultra-wide cameras are both great, but I do love the flexibility the Magic V2 RSR offers with cropping due to the high megapixel count. However, like I said previously, it also has less dynamic range than the Z Fold 5, especially in medium to low light. You can see what I mean in the windows on the building right here. Speaking of low light, The Z Fold 5 tends to have a better overall image compared to the Magic V2 RSR. For starters, the latter tends to add a huge amount of magenta to the photos. This has a huge impact on skin tones for the worse, in my opinion. Take a look at this photo where it turned Edabong's skin a reddish hue compared to the Z Fold 5. The other reason is for the aggressive noise reduction Honor is applying, which greatly softens things and it makes images appear slightly more muddy. One huge W I will give Honor is their action capture mode. It does an excellent job at capturing motion compared to the Z Fold 5, which still suffers from the infamous slow shutter speed issue despite making several improvements over previous models. When it comes to video, both are good, and both suffer from similar issues such as over-sharpening. Both also offer advantages over the other. For instance, the Z Fold 5 can shoot an 8K video up to 30 frames per second. How usable this is depends on your needs, but I personally like being able to do this. The Magic V2 RSR, on the other hand, can record 4K 60 frames per second from the main, telephoto, and ultra-wide cameras, unlike the Z Fold 5, which cannot do this with the ultra-wide. Regardless, from a quality perspective, both are good enough for the average person. If I had to give the W to one, it would be the Z Fold 5 for having a more consistent experience with an excellent pro video and pro photo mode on top of slightly better overall color tones in all lighting conditions, but let me know what you think. Okay, so let's wrap this up. The Galaxy Z Fold 5 and Honor Magic V2 RSR Porsche design are excellent foldable phones. Despite the outdated design Samsung is using, I'd still say it's a more complete foldable phone than the Honor, which is being held back by its software. That's not to say you'll be entirely disappointed with the phone, but if you're wanting the most optimized foldable experience, the Honor Magic V2 RSR just isn't currently offering that. Hopefully, Honor will fix things and bring several improvements when they roll out the Android 14 update. I just don't know how long that's gonna be. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you beautiful people in the next one.